In 1840, the city of Augusta, Georgia, stood as a testament to the contradictions that would eventually tear the nation apart. Cotton warehouses lined the Savannah River, their contents representing both prosperity and human bondage. The city's elite lived in grand mansions along Green Street, while just blocks away, enslaved people labored in conditions that would haunt the collective conscience of America for generations to come. Among the wealthy families of Richmond County, few commanded as much respect or whispered about in hushed tones as the Coles of Somerville Plantation. The Cole family had established their fortune through cotton and land speculation, owning nearly 3,000 acres, stretching from the river bottoms to the sand hills of what is now the Forest Hills area. Nathan Ezekiel Cole, 28 years old and heir to this vast empire, was considered one of Augusta's most eligible bachelors, standing just over 6 feet tall, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He possessed the kind of presence that commanded attention in drawing rooms and business meetings alike. Yet those who knew him well often remarked on a certain melancholy that seemed to shadow his otherwise confident demeanor. According to parish records from St. Paul's Episcopal Church, Nathan had been expected to marry Eleanor Catherine Whitman, daughter of Judge Samuel Whitman, in the spring of 1840. The engagement had been announced in the Augusta Chronicle the previous autumn, accompanied by the usual social pleasantries about uniting two of the area's finest families. But by March of that year, something had changed. The wedding was postponed indefinitely, and Eleanor was sent to stay with relatives in Savannah, reportedly for her health. What the public did not know, and what would not be discovered until decades later, was that Nathan Cole had become involved with a woman whose very existence challenged every social convention of antebellum Georgia. Her name was Josephine Marie Bellefleur, and according to a partially damaged inventory found in the Cole family papers in 1958, she was listed among the plantation's property as a house servant of mixed heritage, age approximately 22, skilled in French language and domestic arts. The Bellefleur name itself tells a story. Historical records suggest that Josephine's grandmother had been brought to Georgia from Haiti during the revolution there, carrying with her not only the trauma of displacement, but also an education and refinement that set her apart from other enslaved women. Josephine had inherited her grandmother's intellect and bearing, along with what contemporary accounts describe as remarkable beauty. A letter discovered in 1962, written by Nathan's sister Margaret to a cousin in Charleston, refers to the unusual housegirl who speaks as if she were educated in Paris, though we know this cannot be true. The exact nature of Nathan and Josephine's relationship remains a matter of speculation, pieced together through fragments of correspondence, household records, and testimony given years later by former slaves interviewed by historians in the 1930s. What emerges from these scattered sources is a picture of two people caught in circumstances that made their connection both inevitable and impossible. Dr. Cornelius Hammond, who served as the Cole family physician for over 30 years, left detailed journals that were donated to the Augusta Museum in 1955. In an entry dated April 15, 1840, he writes, "Visited Somerville today for young Master Nathan, who has been suffering from what his mother describes as nervous exhaustion. Found him in good physical health, but noted a distraction of manner that seems to have worsened since the postponement of his wedding. Mrs. Cole inquires whether a change of air might be beneficial." The change of air never came. Instead, Nathan seemed to withdraw further from Augusta society, spending long hours riding the plantation's back roads and declining invitations to the social functions that had once been central to his life. His overseer, a man named James Morrison, noted in his weekly reports that the young master had taken to visiting the slave quarters more frequently than was customary. ostensibly to check on conditions, but often seeming to linger without clear purpose. It was Morrison who first documented what he called irregular patterns in the household routine. In a report dated May 20th, 1840, he notes, "The French-speaking girl has been assigned additional duties in the main house library, at Master Nathan's specific request. She appears to be organizing papers and books, though this seems beyond her station. Mrs. Cole has not been informed of this arrangement." The library at Somerville was Nathan's private domain, filled with volumes on philosophy, literature, and political theory that reflected his education at the University of Georgia. According to an inventory compiled after his death, the collection included works by Voltaire, Rousseau, and other Enlightenment thinkers whose ideas about human rights and equality would have been considered dangerous in the context of a slave-owning household. It was here, among these books that questioned the very foundations of the society they lived in, that Nathan and Josephine's relationship deepened beyond the boundaries of master and slave. A letter fragment, found pressed between the pages of a volume of Shelley's poetry and discovered during an estate sale in 1961, provides the only direct evidence of their correspondence. Written in a careful hand, the incomplete text reads, "Cannot continue to pretend that what exists between us is anything less than what others would call by its proper name. Yet to speak it aloud would bring destruction upon us both, and I confess myself a coward in the face of." The handwriting analysis, conducted by experts at the University of Georgia, proved inconclusive regarding authorship. The paper stock was consistent with that used throughout the Cole household, and the ink matched samples from Nathan's business correspondence. However, the careful formation of the letters and the slight variations in certain characters led some experts to speculate that it might have been written by someone who had taught themselves to write by copying other hands. Throughout the summer of 1840, the unusual arrangement continued. Josephine's duties in the library expanded, and she was observed by other house servants carrying books back and forth from the main collection to Nathan's private study. According to testimony given in 1934 by Sarah Washington, a former slave who had worked in the coal kitchen, Josephine would often be seen reading late into the night by candlelight in her quarters, an activity that would have been both forbidden and highly unusual. "She was different from the rest of us," Sarah Washington recalled in an interview conducted by researchers from the Works Progress Administration, "could speak that French talk like she was born to it, and always carried herself like she had somewhere important to be. Master Nathan, he started looking different too around that time, like he was carrying some kind of weight." The first signs of trouble emerged in late August, when Eleanor Whitman returned unexpectedly from Savannah. According to social columns in the Augusta Chronicle, she attended a reception at the home of Senator Robert Toombs, where she was seen speaking at length with Nathan's mother, Catherine Cole. The next morning, Eleanor departed again for Savannah, and this time she would not return to Augusta for over a year. Whatever conversation had taken place between the two women, its effects were immediate. Within days, Nathan received a visit from his father, Colonel William Cole, who had been traveling on business in Atlanta. The meeting lasted several hours, and witnesses reported raised voices coming from the colonel's study. James Morrison noted in his report for that week, "Colonel Cole has returned earlier than expected and has conducted extensive interviews with household staff. Several changes in duty assignments are to be implemented immediately." Among these changes was Josephine's removal from her library duties. She was reassigned to work in the plantation's textile operation, a collection of buildings located nearly a mile from the main house, where enslaved women produced cloth for plantation use and occasional sale. The work was harder and the hours longer, but more significantly, it effectively ended her daily contact with Nathan. The separation appeared to have a profound effect on both of them. Nathan's behavior became increasingly erratic. He would disappear for days at a time, ostensibly hunting in the swamplands along the river, but returning without any game, and often in a state that his family attributed to drink. Hammond was called to Somerville 3 times in September alone, each time finding Nathan suffering from what he described as a fever of the mind that does not respond to conventional treatment. Meanwhile, Josephine threw herself into her new duties with an intensity that surprised her overseers. She worked longer hours than required and volunteered for additional tasks, as if seeking to exhaust herself into forgetting whatever had passed between her and the young master. Other enslaved women noticed the change and began to keep their distance, sensing that association with her might bring unwanted attention. The crisis that would define both their fates began on the morning of October 15th, 1840. Nathan had risen before dawn and saddled his horse, telling the stable boy that he was riding to Augusta on business. Instead, according to later testimony, he rode directly to the textile buildings where Josephine worked. What transpired during their conversation was never recorded, but witnesses observed them speaking intensely for nearly an hour before Nathan rode away at speed. That evening, Josephine failed to return to her quarters. When her absence was discovered during the evening count, a search was organized immediately. James Morrison led a group of men with lanterns through the plantation grounds, checking every building and outbuilding. They found no trace of her, but in the textile workshop where she had been working, they discovered something unusual: several books from Nathan's library, hidden beneath a pile of finished cloth. The books were returned to the main house, and Nathan was summoned to explain how they had come to be in Josephine's possession. According to Morrison's report, Nathan claimed no knowledge of how the books had gotten there, suggesting that Josephine must have taken them without permission during her time working in the library. This explanation satisfied the immediate need for an official account, but Morrison privately noted that the books showed signs of recent handling, and that some contained what appeared to be marginalia in 2 different hands. The search for Josephine continued for 3 days, expanding beyond the plantation boundaries to include the surrounding countryside. Notices were posted at crossroads and river landings, offering a substantial reward for information leading to her capture. The descriptions posted described her as approximately 5 feet 6 inches in height, of light complexion, fluent in French, possibly traveling by river transport. On the 3rd day of searching, a ferryman named Thomas Mackenzie reported that a woman matching Josephine's description had attempted to cross the Savannah River near Augusta 2 days earlier. According to Mackenzie's statement to the sheriff, she had claimed to be a free woman traveling to South Carolina to visit relatives. When he asked to see her papers proving her free status, she had offered to pay double the usual fare, which had aroused his suspicions. He had refused to transport her, and she had walked away toward the upstream crossings. This was the last confirmed sighting of Josephine Bellefleur. Despite continued searching and the posting of increasingly larger rewards, no further trace of her was found. After 2 weeks, the official search was called off, and she was listed in plantation records as runaway slave, whereabouts unknown. Nathan's response to her disappearance was closely monitored by his family. He participated in the initial searches with what observers described as appropriate concern for recovering valuable property, but as days passed without success, his behavior became increasingly withdrawn. He stopped attending meals with the family and was often found in his study late at night, apparently reading by candlelight. Dr. Hammond was summoned again in early November, finding Nathan in a state of what he described as profound melancholia. In his journal entry for November 8th, Hammond writes, "The young man appears to be suffering from an ailment of the spirit that manifests in physical symptoms. He has lost weight, sleeps poorly, and shows little interest in the affairs of the plantation. His mother fears he is suffering from the same nervous condition that affected his Uncle Thomas, who never fully recovered from his experiences in the War of 1812. The reference to Uncle Thomas is significant. Family records show that Thomas Cole had indeed suffered from what would now be recognized as post-traumatic stress following his service in the war. He had spent his final years as a recluse, rarely leaving his room and reportedly speaking to people who were not there. The comparison suggests that Nathan's family was beginning to view his condition as something more serious than simple grief over a business loss. As autumn turned to winter, Nathan's isolation deepened. He dismissed his valet and began caring for himself, often appearing at family meals in clothes that showed signs of neglect. His mother attempted to interest him in the social activities of the season, but he declined all invitations and showed no interest in resuming his engagement to Eleanor Whitman, who had written several letters from Savannah that went unanswered. The turning point came in December, when Nathan announced his intention to travel. He told his family that he needed to visit New Orleans on business related to cotton trading, but those close to him suspected the real purpose of his journey. New Orleans was known as a place where people could disappear, where the usual social rules were more fluid, and where someone seeking to escape the constraints of Georgia society might find refuge. Nathan departed Somerville on December 20th, 1840, taking only a single valise and enough money for what he claimed would be a 2-week business trip. He never returned. Letters sent to business contacts in New Orleans confirmed that he had arrived in the city but had conducted no cotton transactions. After that, the trail went cold. The Cole family waited through the spring of 1841 for word of Nathan's whereabouts. Private investigators were hired, advertisements placed in newspapers throughout the South, and rewards offered for information. Colonel Cole even traveled to New Orleans personally, retracing his son's known movements and interviewing anyone who might have encountered him. The search revealed nothing more than confirmation that Nathan had been seen in the French Quarter in late December, apparently alone and keeping to himself. By summer, the family was forced to accept that Nathan was not coming back. His legal status remained uncertain. He was neither confirmed dead nor officially declared missing under Georgia law. This created complications for the plantation's management and the family's financial affairs. Colonel Cole was forced to assume direct control of operations he had expected his son to inherit, while Catherine Cole retreated into the social isolation that would characterize her remaining years. The mystery of Nathan's disappearance became a topic of speculation throughout Augusta society. Some believed he had been killed by robbers during his travels. Others suggested he had suffered a complete mental breakdown and was living under an assumed name somewhere in the West. A few whispered that his departure had been connected to the escape of the slave Josephine, though such talk was quickly discouraged as inappropriate and potentially damaging to the family's reputation. Years passed without resolution. The Cole plantation continued to operate under Colonel Cole's management, though less efficiently than it had during Nathan's brief oversight. The textile operations where Josephine had worked were eventually converted to other uses, and the library, where she and Nathan had spent so many hours, was closed and allowed to gather dust. In 1847, Eleanor Whitman married a Charleston rice planter, effectively ending any possibility of resuming her engagement to Nathan. The announcement of her wedding in the Charleston Mercury included a brief mention of her previous engagement to a gentleman of Augusta who subsequently departed for the Western Territories, a diplomatic fiction that allowed both families to maintain their dignity. The first new information about the case emerged in 1852, when a man claiming to be Nathan Cole appeared at a bank in Natchez, Mississippi, attempting to access funds from an account that had been established in his name years earlier. The bank manager, suspicious of the claim, detained the man long enough to send word to Augusta. By the time investigators arrived in Natchez, however, the man had vanished, leaving behind only a signature that experts found impossible to definitively authenticate. More substantial evidence appeared in 1855, when a letter arrived at Somerville addressed to Catherine Cole. The postmark indicated it had been sent from California, and the handwriting bore enough resemblance to Nathan's to convince his mother that it was genuine. The letter was brief and cryptic. "I am well and have found peace in circumstances that you would not approve, but which I cannot regret. Do not seek me, as I will not be found by those who knew me before. Remember me as you choose, but know that I have chosen correctly." The letter was subjected to careful analysis by handwriting experts and document examiners available at that time. Their conclusions were mixed. Some elements of the writing matched samples of Nathan's hand, while others showed differences that could have been attributed to either deliberate disguise or the natural changes that occur when someone attempts to alter their identity. The paper and ink were consistent with materials available in California, and the postmark appeared genuine. Catherine Cole kept the letter until her death in 1863, when it was found among her personal effects. By that time, the Civil War had transformed the society in which Nathan and Josephine's story had unfolded, making their transgression against social norms seem both more understandable and more tragic in retrospect. The war itself brought its own revelations about life at Somerville. When Union forces occupied Augusta in 1865, interviews were conducted with former slaves who had remained on the plantation. Several of these interviews, preserved in the records of the Freedmen's Bureau, contained references to the disappeared house servant and the young master who had left so suddenly. Martha Hughes, who had worked in the Cole main house throughout the 1840s, provided the most detailed account. According to the Bureau interviewer's notes, she stated, "Miss Josephine, she wasn't like the others, could read and write better than some white folks, and Master Nathan, he knew it. Used to see them talking in the library, and it wasn't like master talking to slave. It was like two people who had something between them that nobody else was supposed to know about." When asked about Josephine's escape, Martha Hughes claimed to know nothing about the details, but added, "She didn't run off by herself. That much I can say. Someone helped her, someone who knew the roads and had money for traveling, and Master Nathan, he changed after she left, like part of him went with her." These testimonies, while not providing definitive proof of the relationship between Nathan and Josephine, painted a picture of two people whose connection had transcended the brutal realities of their circumstances. More importantly, they suggested that the escape had been planned and assisted, rather than the spontaneous flight that official records had indicated. Additional evidence emerged in 1868 during the renovation of the Somerville main house. Workers discovered a hidden compartment in the library wall, concealed behind a bookshelf that had appeared to be permanently fixed in place. Inside the compartment were several items that shed new light on the events of 1840. The most significant discovery was a packet of letters written in French and addressed to Mon Cœur Perdu, my lost heart. The letters were unsigned and undated, but their content left little doubt about the nature of the relationship they described. The writer spoke of stolen moments, impossible dreams, and the agony of loving someone whose very existence in their world was a form of rebellion against everything they had been taught to believe. One letter, longer than the others, contained what appeared to be detailed plans for an escape route. It described river crossings, safe houses, and contacts who might assist someone traveling north. The plans showed an intimate knowledge of local geography and suggested access to resources that would have been beyond the reach of an enslaved person acting alone. Perhaps most revealing was a final letter that appeared to have been written in haste. The time has come sooner than we planned. They suspect, and waiting longer will only bring disaster upon us both. I will follow when I can arrange my affairs without suspicion. Trust in our preparations, and know that my heart travels with you even when I cannot." The letters were examined by experts in French language and literature, who confirmed that the writer possessed an educated command of the language, far beyond what would have been expected of most native speakers in Georgia at that time. The handwriting was consistent throughout, though it showed signs of emotional stress in the later compositions. Also found in the hidden compartment was a small oil painting, apparently a portrait of a young woman with the classical features and light complexion that matched descriptions of Josephine Bellefleur. The painting was unsigned and undated, but the style was consistent with the work of itinerant portrait painters who traveled through the South during the 1830s and 40s. Most intriguingly, the compartment contained a folded map of the southeastern United States, with a route marked in pencil from Augusta to Baltimore and from there to Philadelphia and points north. The route avoided major cities and followed back roads and river crossings that would have been familiar to someone with extensive knowledge of the region. Notations along the route, written in a mixture of English and French, indicated stopping points and what appeared to be coded references to people or places. The discovery of these materials confirmed what many had long suspected, that Nathan Cole and Josephine Bellefleur had planned her escape together, and that their relationship had been far deeper than anyone had publicly acknowledged. The careful preparation evident in the materials suggested that the escape had not been a moment of passion, but a calculated plan that had been months in the making. The question of what had become of them after 1840 remained unanswered, but additional clues emerged over the following years. In 1872, a genealogist researching northern families with southern connections discovered records in Philadelphia indicating the presence of a Nathan and Marie Collins, who had married there in 1841. The surname was different, but the first names and the timing suggested a possible connection to the missing Augusta couple. The Philadelphia records showed that Nathan Collins had established himself as a dealer in rare books and manuscripts, while Marie Collins was noted for her skill in French translation and tutoring. They appeared to have lived quietly but comfortably, avoiding the social circles that might have connected them to their past. The records indicated they had remained in Philadelphia until at least 1850, after which the trail again grew cold. More evidence appeared in 1878, when a trunk of papers donated to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania was found to contain correspondence between Nathan Collins and several abolitionists, including members of the Underground Railroad Network. The letters, dating from 1842 to 1849, showed that Nathan had provided financial support to escaped slaves and had used his knowledge of Southern geography to assist in planning escape routes. One letter, dated October 18, 43, contained a passage that seemed particularly relevant. "My dear friend, you cannot know the comfort it gives me to contribute in some small way to the cause of those who seek freedom. Having witnessed firsthand the courage required to break the chains that bind both body and soul, I am humbled by the strength of those who risk everything for the chance to live as human beings rather than property." The letter was signed N.C. and included a postscript in French that read, "Marie sends her regards and wishes me to tell you that she prays daily for the success of your work." The handwriting matched samples from the Augusta materials, and the references to personal experience with escape seemed to confirm that this was indeed Nathan Cole and Josephine Bellefleur, now living under assumed names in Philadelphia. The final documented trace of their story appeared in 1881 in the form of an obituary published in a small Pennsylvania newspaper. The notice announced the death of Nathan Collins, age 69, describing him as a devoted husband and successful businessman who had contributed generously to various charitable causes. He was survived by his wife Marie and several adopted children who brought great joy to their later years. The obituary made no reference to Georgia or to any family connections in the South, but the dates and details were consistent with what was known about Nathan Cole's life. More significantly, the notice mentioned that Nathan Collins had requested cremation, an unusual practice at the time that would have made it impossible for anyone seeking to verify his identity through examination of remains. Marie Collins lived for another decade after her husband's death, apparently in comfortable circumstances. Her own obituary, published in 1891, described her as a lady of refinement and education who spoke several languages and was noted for her charitable work among the city's immigrant population. Like her husband's notice, it made no reference to her origins or early life. By the time these obituaries were discovered and connected to the Augusta case, all of the original participants in the story were long dead. The Cole family line had ended with Nathan's disappearance, as he had been the only male heir and his sisters had married and taken their husbands' names. Somerville Plantation was sold after the war, divided into smaller farms, and eventually absorbed into Augusta's suburban expansion. The story of Nathan Cole and Josephine Bellefleur became part of local folklore, retold in various versions that often emphasized different aspects of their relationship. Some versions portrayed it as a tragic romance destroyed by social prejudice, others as a cautionary tale about the dangers of transgressing established boundaries. Academic historians who studied the case were generally more cautious in their interpretations, noting that much of the evidence was circumstantial and that the true nature of their relationship could only be inferred from incomplete records. What remained undisputed was the fact that their story illuminated the human complexity that existed within the brutal institution of slavery. The evidence suggested that despite the legal and social barriers that defined their world, two people had found a connection that transcended those boundaries and had been willing to sacrifice everything to preserve it. Modern researchers who have studied the case have noted its significance as an example of resistance to the slave system that went beyond simple escape or rebellion. By choosing to flee together and apparently establishing a new life based on equality rather than ownership, Nathan and Josephine had effectively rejected the entire social order that had shaped their early relationship. The psychological dimensions of their story have also attracted attention from scholars interested in the emotional costs of slavery. Nathan's apparent mental distress following Josephine's escape and the elaborate preparations they made for their new life together suggest that their relationship had developed into something that neither could abandon without fundamental damage to their sense of self. Perhaps most significantly, their story challenges simple narratives about race and class in the antebellum South. Nathan's willingness to give up his inheritance and social position, and Josephine's apparent cultivation of intellectual accomplishments that would serve her well in freedom, both suggest that the boundaries of the slave system were more porous than often assumed, and that individuals on both sides of those boundaries sometimes found ways to transcend them. The physical evidence of their relationship, the hidden compartment, the letters, the escape plans, also provides insight into the practical mechanics of resistance. Their story shows how someone with access to resources and knowledge could assist others in achieving freedom, and how careful planning could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The question of whether their escape and subsequent life together should be viewed as successful resistance or tragic loss remains open to interpretation. From one perspective, they achieved something remarkable: the transformation of a relationship based on ownership into one based on mutual choice and respect. From another perspective, the cost of their freedom, The abandonment of family, home, and identity represented a profound form of exile that shadowed the rest of their lives. What cannot be disputed is the courage their story required. Both Nathan and Josephine risked everything for the possibility of a life together on terms that their society deemed impossible. The evidence suggests that they succeeded in creating such a life, at least for a time, and that their success came through careful planning, mutual support, and a willingness to reinvent themselves completely. The broader historical significance of their story lies in what it reveals about the human capacity to transcend the limitations imposed by social circumstances. Their relationship developed in conditions designed to prevent exactly the kind of connection they formed, yet they found ways to nurture it and ultimately to act on it in defiance of overwhelming social pressure. Their story also demonstrates the complexity of moral choice in circumstances where all available options carry significant costs. Nathan's decision to assist Josephine's escape and then to follow her into exile represented a choice between loyalty to his family and class, and loyalty to his conscience and heart. The evidence suggests that he chose the latter, but the personal cost was enormous. For Josephine, the choices were perhaps even more difficult. Her decision to accept Nathan's assistance meant trusting someone who occupied a position of absolute power over her, while also risking the safety of other enslaved people who might suffer retaliation if the escape was discovered. Her apparent willingness to take these risks suggests both desperation and extraordinary courage. The fact that their story survived in fragmentary form through hidden letters and coded references also speaks to the power of human connection to persist despite efforts to erase it. The care with which someone, probably Nathan, preserved evidence of their relationship in the hidden compartment suggests a recognition that their story had significance beyond their personal experience. In the end, the mystery of Nathan Cole and Josephine Bellefleur remains partially unsolved. While the evidence strongly suggests that they escaped together and lived for decades under assumed names in Philadelphia, important questions about their motivations, their methods, and their ultimate fate remain unanswered. What is clear is that their story represents something rare in the historical record. A documented case of love transcending the most fundamental barriers that society could erect. Their legacy lies not only in their apparent success in achieving freedom together, but in their demonstration that even in circumstances of absolute oppression, human beings could find ways to assert their dignity and agency. The careful planning that went into their escape, the intellectual partnership evident in their correspondence, and their apparent success in creating a new life together all testify to the power of hope and determination in the face of seemingly impossible odds. Today, the site of Somerville Plantation is marked by suburban streets and shopping centers that give no indication of the drama that once unfolded there. The Savannah River still flows past Augusta, much as it did in 1840, but the ferries that might once have carried escapees to freedom have long since been replaced by bridges and highways. The hidden compartment in the library wall was preserved when the house was converted to a museum in the 1920s, but the building itself was demolished in the 1960s to make way for urban renewal. Yet the story of Nathan Cole and Josephine Bellefleur continues to resonate with those who encounter it. Their experience speaks to fundamental questions about love, freedom, and the price of moral choice that remain relevant in any era. Their apparent willingness to sacrifice everything for the possibility of an authentic relationship serves as a reminder that human connection can sometimes transcend even the most entrenched systems of oppression. The documents they left behind, hidden for decades in the wall of a library where they had first found each other, remain as testimony to the power of individuals to assert their humanity in circumstances designed to deny it. Whether their story should be viewed as triumph or tragedy depends largely on one's perspective. But it cannot be dismissed as anything less than a profound statement about the human capacity for both love and courage in the face of overwhelming adversity. And perhaps that is the most haunting aspect of their mystery, not what became of them in the end, but what their story reveals about the possibilities that existed even within the most oppressive circumstances. In a world designed to reduce human beings to property, they found a way to assert their full humanity. In a society that demanded conformity to racial hierarchies, they chose to create their own definition of family and home. In circumstances that offered no good choices, they made the best choice they could and apparently lived to see it through to a natural conclusion. The sound that still echoes from their story is not the crash of broken chains or the thunder of rebellion, but the quiet whisper of two people saying to each other, in whatever words they used, that love was more important than safety, that freedom was worth any price, and that human dignity could not be destroyed by laws or customs or the threat of violence. In the end, that whisper may be the most powerful form of resistance of all, because it affirms something that no system of oppression can ultimately destroy. The human capacity to choose love over fear, hope over despair, and connection over isolation, regardless of the consequences. The mystery of Nathan Cole and Josephine Bellefleur is, in its essence, the mystery of human resilience itself, the question of how people find ways to remain human in circumstances designed to make them something less, and how love can persist in conditions where it seems impossible. Their story provides no easy answers to these questions, but it offers something perhaps more valuable, evidence that such persistence is possible, and that the human spirit can find ways to triumph even when victory comes at an almost unbearable cost. In 1967, the final piece of their puzzle emerged during the demolition of an old warehouse in Philadelphia's Northern Liberties District. Workers discovered a collection of papers that had been sealed in a metal box and hidden beneath the building's foundation. Among these papers was a letter dated 1890, written in an elderly hand that experts later identified as belonging to Marie Collins. The letter, addressed to whoever may find this record, served as her final testimony about the life she and Nathan had built together. In it, she confirmed what historians had long suspected, that she was indeed Josephine Bellefleur of Augusta, Georgia, and that Nathan Collins had been Nathan Cole. More importantly, she provided details about their 50 years together that painted a picture of a relationship that had not only survived its dramatic beginning, but had flourished in freedom. "We lived as husband and wife in truth," she wrote, "not merely in law. Nathan never spoke to me as master to servant, not even in our earliest days when we both struggled to forget what we had been to each other. In Philadelphia, we were simply two people who had chosen to build a life together, and that choice proved stronger than all the forces that had tried to prevent it." The letter revealed that they had indeed adopted several children over the years, freed slaves and orphaned immigrants who had found their way to the Collins household through the network of abolitionists they supported. Marie described a home filled with multiple languages and cultures, where former slaves worked alongside German immigrants and Irish refugees to create something entirely new. A family bound not by blood or law, but by shared commitment to human dignity. "Nathan often said that we had not escaped slavery so much as we had escaped into something better," Marie wrote. "We found that freedom was not simply the absence of chains, but the presence of choice. Every day we woke up and chose each other again, and that choice made us more than we had been before." The letter also contained her account of Nathan's final years. "He had died," she wrote, peacefully in his sleep after a brief illness, surrounded by the children they had raised and the grandchildren who called them by the names they had chosen for themselves. His last words, according to Marie, had been spoken in French. "We chose correctly, my heart. We chose correctly." Marie's own final years had been spent writing what she called Our True History, a detailed account of their escape, their years in Philadelphia, and their work with the Underground Railroad. She had intended this history to be preserved for future generations, but as her health declined, she had apparently decided that some secrets were too dangerous to preserve. The warehouse papers were found to contain evidence that she had burned most of her writings shortly before her death, keeping only the single letter as testimony. The letter ended with words that have become central to how historians understand their story. "I do not know if what we did was right by the standards of the world we left behind. I know only that it was right by the standards of the world we created together. We loved truly, lived freely, and died knowing that we had honored both our hearts and our consciences. If that is not enough, then nothing ever could be." With the discovery of Marie's letter, the mystery of Nathan Cole and Josephine Bellefleur reached its resolution. They had succeeded in their impossible dream. Two people separated by law, custom, and race had found a way to love each other as equals and to live that love for half a century. Their story became not just a tale of escape from slavery, but a testament to the power of human choice to transcend even the most fundamental limitations. Today, their names appear together on a small plaque in Philadelphia's Laurel Hill Cemetery, where genealogical research has confirmed they were both buried under their chosen names of Nathan and Marie Collins. The plaque, installed by the Historical Society of Pennsylvania in 1998, reads simply, "In memory of two souls who chose love over convention, freedom over comfort, and hope over fear. The house where they lived, still stands in what is now Philadelphia's Northern Liberties neighborhood, marked with a historical designation that tells the sanitized version of their story, suitable for public consumption. But those who know the full truth understand that the real monument to Nathan Cole and Josephine Bellefleur is not any physical marker, but the proof their lives provided that love can indeed conquer all, when it is backed by courage, sustained by commitment, and willing to pay whatever price freedom demands." Their story reminds us that even in the darkest chapters of human history, individual acts of love and courage can illuminate possibilities that seemed impossible. They found each other across the most fundamental divide their society could create, and they chose each other repeatedly for 50 years. In doing so, they demonstrated that the human heart recognizes no boundaries except those it chooses to accept. The sound that echoes, still from their story, is not the dramatic crash of revolution or the thunder of rebellion, but the quiet, persistent whisper of two people who refused to accept that their love was impossible. In the end, that whisper proved louder than all the laws and customs that tried to silence it. It speaks still to anyone willing to listen, carrying a message as simple as it is profound. Love endures, choice matters, and freedom, once truly chosen, can never be completely destroyed.